Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Today is March 24th, and we're here tonight for a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and the School Committee. Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
Motion.
Second.
I believe we might have to have every department open and do a roll call vote.
Okay. Okay, for school committee, may I request a motion, please, to open the joint meeting of March 24th of the Acushnet Select Board, Finance and School Committee?
Second.
Okay. And we'll take, would Kelly take the vote? Okay, so I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Tevz? You're on mute.
No, I'm not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Gomes?
Yes.
Mr. Hood?
Yes.
Mr. Sumner?
Yes.
And I'm Miss Downing, yes.
Okay, as the acting Finance Committee Chair, do I have a motion to open the meeting?
So move.
Second. All right, we'll do a roll call. We'll start with John Howcroft.
Yes.
Sue Delgado. Sue, can you hear us? I think she said
Sorry.
yes.
Yep. Yes, I did.
Okay, gotcha. Bob Ferrera,
Yes.
Gail Rodricks,
Yes.
and Eric McGlynn.
Yes.
And concerning the Board of Selectmen, as the only member present tonight, I say yes also. to open the meeting. Thank you very much. So I don't know how we're set up to present tonight, but I assume Dr. Bailey will lead the way here, and we'll follow from there.
Sure. I'm just going to share my screen, and if you could just indicate that you can see this.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, very good.
excellent. Oops. All right. Okay. So I am pleased.
Excuse me,
to
point
be
of
here
order,
tonight.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
How will we conduct the, this presentation in the sense, when will we be able to ask for clarifications or questions? Shall it be at the end of one segment, or should we just break in during the presentation?
I'm okay with breaking in during the presentation, and that way you don't forget what you were going to ask. You okay with that, Mr. Desroches?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Very good.
Yep.
Okay. So tonight we want to present to you our annual budget for FY 2022, and this was approved recently at our school committee meeting. And everything we do in terms of budget and district strategy is always based on our foundation of mission and vision. So just a reminder to everyone, the mission of the Acushnet Public Schools is in partnership with all of our stakeholders to promote student success, growth, and learning in a safe and supportive environment. And the vision is to be a high-performing school district where all students are afforded the opportunities to realize their potential. And again, everything is grounded in our core values that we do, and we're really sticking to those values. So the main three that we want to focus on are we value cultivating student enthusiasm and creativity so that we can bring forth the unique strengths of all of our students. We value enhancing students' critical thinking and problem-solving capabilities to tackle the complex realities our students will face now and in the future. And we value instilling a growth mindset in students so that they learn to persevere to achieve their hopes and dreams. So we have this mantra in the district, 2 schools, 1 district. And over the past several years, we've really come together to work together as a team. We're located, as you know, on 1 campus. So we really try to pool our resources together whenever we can. And we've seen some really nice things happening where staff members from each school actually are able to help each other out. So for example, our clinical team works together as 1 unit and in the best interest of all the students within the district. And the 4 main things that we are, in terms of our district strategy that we've been focused on is alignment. That's curriculum alignment, communication, student support, and community, our partnerships. As you know, when I first came into the district a couple of years ago, I did a listening tour. So this all stems back to our feedback that we received from all of our stakeholders. I'll focus on curriculum alignment and student support right now. But teachers really felt at the time that the curriculum and the resources used lacked consistency and alignment. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk more about that tonight, how the curriculum has been completely outdated in all of the content areas. Stakeholders expressed concern with the lack of vertical alignment across the grade levels, specifically the transition from the elementary to the middle school. And in terms of student support, the staff were concerned about the lack of effective support and programming for struggling learners. And staff and students expressed concerns about meeting the social, emotional needs of all students. And you'll see that, especially in this year of the pandemic, all these things are extremely relevant as we move forward tonight. So after the listening tour, we developed our district strategy and our plans, and our strategic objectives are achieving academic excellence for all students, creating thriving social and emotional learning experiences for all students, and strengthening partnerships with families and the greater community. This slide, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but this is a 3-year comparison of MCAS scores. I know that last year we talked about MCAS scores. We didn't have MCAS this past year due to the pandemic, but I think what was of great concern is that the state was basically outperforming us on the exceeding expectations section. And when you look at our population in Acushnet, a lot of stakeholders could not understand how the state as a whole could be outperforming us in Acushnet. So we know that if we got our numbers up in the exceeding, we want all of our kids to be in the meeting and or the exceeding. So we would have less kids in the partially meeting expectations and the not meeting expectations.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm not looking at the same figures. You have, I think you directed us to the exceeding expectations, but when we got to the second line, the district was 50% meeting expectations, while the state was 42%.
Correct.
Also partial meeting expectations, it was the same as the state. Not meeting expectations, the state was higher by 11% and our 6%. Our average scale score was higher than the state. So I'm just, saying, I'm drawing attention to all the other columns of figures rather than the top one.
Okay.
So it doesn't show a grim picture at this point, because we're looking at 2019.
Acushnet holds their own for the most part in terms of being average, but we're really striving that our district could go above and beyond and really exceed, based on the fact that we don't have high population of students in poverty and English learners like many districts across the state do. So that's all I was calling attention to that.
Have you compared like communities as far as what they're accomplishing in MCAS, the same demographics, or even have you compared figures with Fairhaven, whereas majority of our children go to high school, and compare what their MCAS scores are compared with ours?
So we have what's called the DART tool, which is like districts. And just because Fairhaven, for example, is right next door to us does not necessarily mean that we're exactly alike. It basically compares districts that are very much like Acushnet. So I don't have that tonight, that information tonight, but basically what we try to do is compare like districts with like districts. So
Correct.
districts that have the same population of students, how they're performing versus how Acushnet is performing. So
Right, and
like that.
poverty, the level of
Yeah,
poverty, yes.
exactly.
It's a major
Um,
factor.
We have always said that we want our students, when they go into New Bedford High School, Fairhaven High School, and Old Colony, we want Acushnet students to be ready for high school. And when I had come into the district, if you go back here, what stakeholders said about alignment and student support, we were also hearing from stakeholders from Fairhaven High School in particular, because that's where the majority of our students attend, that they were not seeing students totally ready, especially in the area of math. So we have done some things in the district in terms of strengthening our math programming, and we're going to continue to strengthen our curriculum overall. But I will just, like to note that the district has not had a curriculum adoption in a normal, typical fashion. So in other words, most districts don't do everything at once because they have a cycle of maybe this year is math and next year we look at ELA. But our district has not had any adoptions for years. So we're really looking to get our kids the, high quality research-based curriculum that they so desperately need, and doing it in a way that's appropriate for students and for staff to be able to roll it out as appropriate. We can't do it all in 1 year, but we know that our students only have 1 year at 3rd grade, 1 year at 7th grade. So we're doing the very best we can to get this back to what it should be. And then we plan to have a rollout that's more typical, where we're not looking at, purchasing curriculum all at once. Okay. So in terms of planning for this budget, we had some guiding priorities. We wanted updated curriculum that is highly rated and rigorous, and there's ways that we're able to do that. We're looking at ed reports and things that were highly rated, and those were up for consideration if they're rated green, let's say, but we don't entertain any curriculum that isn't highly rated and rigorous. Again, we want our students to be ready for that next level. We want to continue to enhance our curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We want to maintain and enhance the district's technology infrastructure and equipment. And I think that was so relevant this year during the pandemic. We went to a one-to-one district where all of our students had devices. And, it's one thing to be able to purchase all of this equipment, the necessary equipment that we needed, depending what learning model we were in, whether it was hybrid or remote. And now we're getting back to more in-person learning, but we need to be able to really maintain that level of technology. We also prioritize strengthening response to intervention, and I talked about that. That was stakeholders' concerns that kids who were falling behind weren't getting the supports that they needed, and really supporting all learners. So that includes kids who might be in the advanced categories. What are we doing to challenge those learners? We, in this budget, would like to address learning loss during the pandemic. We know that every year there's a typical summer slide, so to speak, with learning loss, but we certainly know that our children have not had the amount of in-person schooling this year due to the pandemic. And the research shows that whenever there's a quote bad year, it takes 3 years to overcome just a typical bad year. I'm not even sure that there's studies done, and I'm sure there will be studies done about this, but we're planning to address learning loss immediately. We want to increase, excuse me, my lights. Oh gosh, hold on one second, please. Thank you. We want to address, we want to increase capacity to address social and emotional learning. And again, that was very apparent this year where we had students with high anxiety, with all of this COVID-19, the issues of being home and learning in a way that was very different. So our clinical team is working very hard to address those issues. We want to support professional development to enhance student learning, and that's so needed, especially when we're bringing on new curriculum. And we would like to maintain reasonable class sizes. So in terms of our budget process, we've been working on this from December of last year all the way up until now. Administrators formulated budget requests in conjunction with staff requests. So the leadership met with their teams to discuss what was needed at each building level. We talked about what was needed for the whole district. And then the budget subcommittee met in February and March to review the budget with the leadership team. And our budget that we were approved by the school committee that we're proposing here tonight is $15,349,481, which is an increase of $393,967, which is a 2.6% increase over last year's budget. And overall, what this does is it maintains level services. It addresses the pandemic learning loss. It brings in new curriculum. It brings in 8 new full-time positions and 2 new part-time positions. And we're going to get more into detail in terms of how that works. And wow, look at that. And it's only a 2.6% increase. How did we do that? So we're going to get into that later in the presentation. So I believe Mrs. Flynn is going to pick up from here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to have my presentation in 4 parts. So the first part is we're going to talk about what makes up the FY22 preliminary budget, the $15,349,000. The second part is we'll talk about what's changed from last year to this year, what makes up that 2.6% increase. The third part is we'll summarize it, and the fourth part is we'll talk about our capital requests that we have. So this is a slide of what our budget looks like in a chart form. As you can see, the major component, of course, is salaries. We're a human-driven business, so salaries are just about 60% of the budget. The next highest amount is our tuition, and that includes tuitions to high schools and tuitions to out-of-district placements. That's 23%. Student services, which the majority of it is transportation and medical and health services, some student activities, is 8.3%. Instruction is all of the supplies and materials that go along with what we do here with teaching and learning. Facilities makes up just under 3%, and that small sliver of lime green is the admin portion, and that's less than 1%. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each of those components, and we'll talk about what makes up that portion of the budget. So the first portion is the largest, is salaries at $9,185,104. So we have a total staff of 145.8 FTE. And FTE means full-time equivalency. So that means we have some part-time positions when you see that fraction there. So in the operating budget, which is what we're talking to you about tonight, we have 127.6 FTE. And 18.2 of our staff is funded by grants and funds. And those are the IDEA and Title I grants and the preschool and school lunch revolving funds. So we're just going to focus on the operating budget funds, which is the $9,185,000. So how do we get to that? Here is our positions that we have. And these are all broken down by how they're classified with the Department of Ed chart of accounts. That's how we account for all of our expenses here at the school department from the Department of Ed. So the organization that we have that you're going to see is all based on that chart of accounts. So it might be a little different than what you're used to, but this is based on how we have to report to our Department of Education. So the district leadership and administration, that's four individuals.
Just one
Yes.
question. When you go through these positions, would like to have seen a line item type of presentation
Mhm.
where each of the positions are outlined as far as, by name, what the title and how much is being expended on each one. This is helpful, but it's very generous. Number
Sure.
two, yeah, and number two, when you mention about classroom teachers, that's I'd like to have a breakdown, like how many classrooms we have with with one teacher,
Mhm.
and also when we get further into the discussion as far as the number of teachers that have a direct impact on the curriculum, which in turn affects MCAS
Okay, so I
scores.
can address your first question. I sent the line item budget off to the town administrator and to the finance committee secretary this afternoon. So I'm not sure how to get that all out to you folks. You may have it, you may not have it, but it's actually been sent out. So it is available.
Okay,
As
good.
for your second question, I think when you look at that, you'll be able to see, but I will try to give some general information when we get to that, and Dr. Bailey can certainly expound upon that. So you have your district leadership and administration. So basically that's the superintendents and the business office, and that's that component. Instructional leadership, that is our main offices, the principal's offices, the student services offices, the technology office. So you see that there. You see there's a small component being funded by our IDEA grant.
Yeah, and we will receive that information as far as a breakdown. You've already sent that, is that correct?
Yes, I've sent it off to
Okay,
Ms. Heber and Ms. Murray.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
With
Classroom
the-
Classroom teachers, we have 78. 2.5 are funded through the Title I grant and the preschool revolving fund. So you can see that's the majority of our salary expenditure. Of course, that's the majority of our people here. And those classroom teachers, they could be direct grade level teachers at the elementary school, the middle school. They may be specialists such as computers, gym, art, STEM, music, phys ed. And they may be special education teachers that go into the classrooms. They may be interventionists. So, but the bulk of them, I don't have the exact number for you right now, but the bulk of them, I would say, are direct instruction. Is that fair to say, Dr. Bailey?
Yes, and in terms of who impacts the MCAS, and I go back to that first slide, 2 schools, 1 district, it's really every single teacher as the curriculum spirals. So starting in preschool and kindergarten, all those skill sets are built upon each year, and everybody has a piece of MCAS. The children in grades 3, 4, 5, all the way up to grade 8 actually take the assessment each year, but we all have a piece in it in terms of what we're teaching, whatever our role is. So I would say everybody really is responsible. And, when we do our benchmark testing, we do a lot of internal assessments in the district. We're able to actually use our own assessments to predict how well we will not do on MCAS. So, it's a predictor of MCAS, and I can get more into that later in the presentation.
So continuing on, we have our therapists. That's our speech therapists and our occupational therapists. And we have substitute teachers. Now this year, it's a little bit of a change from what everyone is used to for this next year's budget, because we're starting to bring in what we're calling building-based subs. We did that this year during the pandemic. We paid for it with some of our grant funds. And what it was is to have the same set of subs in the building every day. They got to know the students and the teachers in the classrooms, the routines. So it was really very helpful to have. And so instead of calling in a person, here and there, we would always go to our building-based subs. So in this year's budget, you're going to see that we would like to continue that. And there's 4 building-based subs. So when you look at the budget, you're going to see there's 2 in each building.
Excuse
So
me.
you're going, yes.
What was the source of that money that implemented this, that substitute line item?
So we used the CVRF grant from the Department of Ed. That was a grant that all school departments received. So we used a portion of that to pay for a portion of our subs this year. And the rest of it we're paying with local budget funds.
Thank you.
So when you look at the subs for
Kristen,
next year,
Kristen.
you're going to see, of course, when we get to the increase, we're going to see an increase in that area. But what we did is we backed off a little on the per diem subs with the idea that for the first 2 people that are out on any given day in the building, those building-based subs will fill. Now, of course, we may need to tap into per diem subs. So we do have some amount of money in for the per diem subs as well.
Excuse me, Kristen.
Yes,
I have a question for you.
yes.
Once the schools are fully reopened and everything is back to normal, is there still going to be a need for these 4 building-based subs on a permanent basis?
We believe so. I'll let Dr. Bailey address that, because I know that's something that we've talked about at our meetings in the past. So I believe that there will be, it's just the importance of having that same person there that knows the routine. So I'll let Dr. Bailey, expand on that one.
Just because if you have a full complement of teachers, I mean, what are these subs going to be doing during the course of the day?
So I can say that having building-based subs is a very common practice in other districts, and Acushnet has just never been doing that. So it's something that we felt was very necessary this year. But what we've seen with it, it's improved relationships with school staff. So these building-based subs are a regular member of the team. They're able to observe routines and build rapport with our students and staff, administrators and parents. It's improved knowledge of school procedures, including safety drills. They've been included because they do work every day on all of our professional development and staff meetings. So again, increased knowledge for the day-to-day operations. Improved opportunities for student achievement by having the knowledge of classroom procedures and management styles of the permanent teacher. So in the past, when we had a random sub come in, quite honestly, at times the goal was to keep the children safe. And I'm not sure exactly how much learning got done because these were random people who were not familiar with the curriculum and the plans. Students we found feel more comfortable and will tend to have a more productive day with regular staff. And we feel like their learning improves as a result of less disruption and fewer substitute teachers throughout the school year.
Is there proof or evidence that shows that the learning has improved?
Well, by anecdotally, we can tell you that these building-based subs jump right in like a teacher would. And I can tell you that calls to the office is minimal, referrals to the office, whereas sometimes when we have substitute teachers come in, they need quite a bit of assistance for figuring out plans, maybe dealing with some students. But these building-based subs know our students and they know the routine. So it's been great. For prearranged absences, teachers can actually brief the substitute well in advance with any necessary information. And the substitute can provide valuable feedback in writing or in person at the conclusion of that assignment. And this really facilitates the continuity of instruction and allows for follow-up on behavioral issues. So that's how we've utilized them at both buildings this year. And this is, like I said, it's a very common practice in districts across the Commonwealth. And it's something that we find is really positive for students and for staff, but mostly for students and their learning and the continuity of instruction.
Question, the funds that you use this year, Kristen mentioned the source. Are those funds available in this coming fiscal year as well?
No, not that we know of yet. That particular grant, it was originally supposed to be spent by December 30th, 2020. And then they extended it to right around Christmas time, they extended it to June 30th. But knowing that we had to have it spent by December 30th, that was the plan all along, we planned our expenditure. So we had that pretty well fully expended by the end of the year. That particular grant is not something that's been announced. However, there are other grants that are going to be available to the school department next year.
Mrs. Flynn,
Yes.
do you know what the total fundraising grant money was last year?
Off the top of my head, no, but I can certainly, I can get that for you. I know I had presented that at a school committee meeting, so I can easily find that, but
Okay,
I'm just
when
gonna
you,
continue on for now and we can
Okay.
get that. I'm gonna make a note and we can get that for you.
thanks.
You're welcome. Okay. So continuing on with our salaries, our next group we have is paraprofessionals, and they are what was formerly known as, you may know them as the teacher's aides. They're paraprofessionals. We have 21 of them. 6 of them are paid by our grants, our IDEA and preschool revolving fund. The counselors are the student adjustment counselors and guidance counselors, school psychologist. Attendance and residency is a small stipend paid for an individual to check on student attendance and residency. Medical and health is our school nurses and our small contract with a school physician. We have 9 food service employees. You see there's $0 in the budget for that because they're funded by school lunch revolving. Student activity stipends are the stipends paid for club leaders, for sports and other, intramurals type of things. So those, hopefully we'll be able to get those back in action next year. School security is our portion of our school resource officer. And finally, we have the facilities employees. We have 7 in this budget, 7.4 facilities, and that's maintenance and custodial. So that's it for salaries. And again, right now, we're just talking about what's in the budget. We'll talk about the changes in a little bit. So our next largest is our tuitions to other schools. The first part of that is our tuitions to mass schools. That's how the Department of Ed classifies it. So I put the number of students we have projected at our various high schools that we pay tuition to and the dollar amounts there. You can see, for example, we are budgeting 223 students to go to Fairhaven High School next year. And this is down about 30 students from what we currently budgeted this year. So that's part of the decrease that we're going to talk about in a little bit. We have 22 students budgeted for New Bedford High School, 10 for Bristol Aggie, and 18 for school choice. And there is a small state assessment for that is in our budget. So that's why you see some funds there. The next portion of our tuition is our out-of-district tuition, our special education tuition. So we're budgeting for $525,000 for collaborative schools and $262,000 for private schools. And that's offset by the circuit breaker revenue that we're receiving this year that we're going to carry over to next year to offset that tuition amount that we need. The third largest component is our student services. And as you can see, the bulk of it is in transportation. We have a separate slide for that. But a few other things that I'll go over again is attendance and residency. So these are expenses related to these, not salaries, because we talked about that already, but the expenses. So attendance and residency, travel reimbursement, for example, medical and health services, supplies for our nursing offices, student activities, supplies and services for any of our clubs. It might be busing to when we play near Mandan or Keith or Roosevelt junior high schools. It may be some supplies that we need for some of these teams, uniforms, things like that. And then transportation, of course, is our largest one. So we'll talk about that. So in transportation, it's made up of regular day. So that's what you would know as the big yellow bus. Special education, that's the vans that we contract with to go to our various placements throughout the general area that our students go to. McKinney-Vento is homeless transportation. So if we have homeless students, I know for those of you who have been on the finance committee before, we've spent some time talking about that. So we are required to share the transportation with the other district. If a student becomes homeless from Acushnet and is attending a school in New Bedford, Acushnet and New Bedford share that transportation to get that student to where they need to go. We also have the late bus at Ford Middle School, and we also have foster student transportation. Again, it's like the homeless student. If there's a student who's a foster student and is placed in as an Acushnet resident, but is placed in a foster home in New Bedford, they can remain in Acushnet, but we have to pay to get them here. Right now, there's no mandated share on foster students. Okay. So the fourth largest component we have is our instructional services. And again, this is all of the supplies of what we do in instruction. So you can see it's broken down from various things. The biggest one is curriculum materials, and instructional technology. So our instructional technology is anything to do with the technology of the district. It could be hardware, it could be software, it could be network, infrastructure, any supplies, subscriptions, things like that. Curriculum materials, you know, in the past that would be our textbooks, but now those are, a lot of them are digital subscriptions. So we have, that's a big increase for us. So when we get to that part, Dr. Bailey and I will talk more about why that line has increased so much. But you can see some other ones, psychological services and supplies, general school supplies. So that's going to be your crayons, pencils, notebook paper, copy paper, rulers, erasers, you know, you get it, whatever we need, the kids need in their classrooms. Professional development, that also includes tuition reimbursement for staff, and also any conferences, travel, any speakers that come in. So that's what is in that line item. Our fifth largest component is our facilities. So you can see the supplies and services for custodial services, $40,000. Heating of buildings, so that's the oil that we need for both of our buildings, $132,000. Utilities other than heat, so that's our electricity, gas, water, sewer, telephone, $150,000, and maintenance, $97,000. And finally, our smallest component is our district administration. So that's our expenses that are related to the superintendent's office, the business office, and the school committee expenses. So for example, I'll take a look at audit services, kind of in the middle, for $4,000. That's what we need to pay to have our end of year report. That's a summary of all our revenues and expenditures audited, and that is required by the Department of Ed. You'll see legal services, so that's our school committee attorney. You'll see that there. Some consultant services and some conferences, travel reimbursement, dues and subscriptions, and office supplies. So that's that small lime green component of the budget.
Question on the legal services, Kristen.
Yes.
How has that changed in the past, say, 3 years?
In the past 3 years, it is really a kind of a 3-year cycle, because again, when we are in negotiations with for our contracts, we of course rely on our attorneys more. So in that year that we're negotiating contracts, you're going to see that we spend more for our attorneys' fees. So for example, looking at the budget, in FY18, we spent, our actual was $35,000. FY19, our actual was $58,000. FY20, our actual was about $55,000. And we're down a little bit this year, year to date, for our spending. So that's pretty much, around what we've been spending the past few years.
Yeah, that's been a stable type of.
Yes, and like I said, sometimes when we do have contract negotiations, you're going to see that go up a little bit. So that's the end of the first part of my presentation. So we're going to go into part 2, and this is where we're going to talk about what's changed from last year to this year. How did we get that almost $400,000 increase? Because that sounds like a lot, right? But it is a $15 million budget, so it doesn't, and we have some big budget items, so it doesn't take much. But I still want to explain that because I think that's probably the most important part of this presentation. So you can see, just basically summarizing, we had increases in salaries, of course. We have contracts that have adjustments. In instruction, a lot of that is our new curriculum that we are putting in, and facilities. Our decreases were in tuition, transportation, and a small amount of professional development and contract services. So we're going to get into each one of those.
Kristen, are you going to be able to explain the tuition drop? Like,
Yes.
where did students go?
Yes. Okay, so we'll start with salaries. So our salary increase is broken out into two components. So our contractual increases, so that would be driven by any union contracts or any individual contracts, you know, the steps and the COLAs. That's about 170,000. And those new positions that we talked to you about earlier, we're going to talk a little bit more about them, but those are about 500,000. Okay, so here are the new positions that we're asking for that we have. So the first one is a district-wide academic coach, a math interventionist at the elementary school, a general interventionist half-time at the elementary school, library media specialist at Ford Middle School, the reading specialist at Ford Middle School, the 4 building-based subs, and a part-time facilities worker, and the school instructional leadership stipends. So I'll take a few of these. I know we talked about the building-based subs, and then Dr. Bailey can, you know, chime in on some of the others. So the facilities worker is just a part-time, maybe less than 20 hours a week, individual who can help out on the custodial side and the maintenance side. Now we only have one person that does maintenance for the whole district, and that one person also supervises the custodians, does all of the maintenance for the buildings and grounds. So we used to have 2 maintenance workers, and then during budget times that we had to cut, we went down to 1, and that person didn't supervise the custodians. Now we're still at 1, and we're requiring that person to supervise the custodians in addition to being the maintenance worker. So we really need some support. And sometimes there's some jobs that, of course, you know it as homeowners, that just need a second set of hands sometimes. So that's what we're looking for our part-time facilities worker. The school instructional leadership stipends at the elementary school. We had them here this year, and it's teacher leaders that is working out quite well, and we wanted to put it in place in the elementary school. And we did talk about the building-based subs, so I will turn it over to Dr. Bailey, who can talk a little bit more about these other positions.
Sure. So the district-wide academic coach, that would be adding a coach. We currently have in our district 1 academic coach for both schools, and that's really looking at building the capacity of adults. It's really needed now more than ever, especially with all of this new technology and curriculum. And it's really has not been reasonable for one person to be the expert in every single content area. So a lot of schools who have this model with coaches, they actually have at least 2 coaches in a building. So there would be an ELA coach in humanities and a focus on math. So we'd like to do the same thing for the district, and at least have 2 coaches that we can cover ELA and humanities, and then the math and the science. So there's more of a focus, and the teachers are getting the support that they need with this new curriculum. And we're doing a lot at this, at the same time. It's a balancing act, but that is a big sense of support. And the impact that these coaches will have is they work with all of the teachers in the district. They model lessons. So they work sometimes with kids, but basically it's adult focused, so that the impact that they have will be on all of the kids. So it's a huge impact by having an additional coach. The math interventionist at the elementary school, and then a part-time interventionist at the elementary school. I'll talk about those. As you know, we have a building-based budget where the principals, they put in their request, and this was something that is coming out of the elementary school. We do have some data to back up the request. But in order to, again, address those learning gaps due to the pandemic and prior, we feel it's necessary we don't have anybody working on math at all. So this would be one person helping kids with a plan who need extra support in math, but it's really to close those achievement gaps. So just to give you a little sense of some testing that we did this past February, in 2nd grade, we gave them the Galileo benchmark, which is a predictor of MCAS. We only were proficient in 12 out of 26 standards in February. In 3rd grade, we were only proficient in 10 out of 24 standards that they were tested on for that time of the year. And in fourth grade, only proficient in 8 out of 23 standards. And then similarly for math in second grade, we were only proficient in 7 out of 28 standards. Third graders only proficient in 9 out of 34 standards. And fourth grade only proficient in 11 out of 33 standards. So there is definitely a need, and going back to my listening tour, this has come up from the minute I entered the district, that the stakeholders felt like we needed more supports for those students who are struggling. So again, this request in the budget really reflects that need. In terms of a library media specialist, we really believe that this is at Ford Middle School. This was their request, and this is something that they've been requesting for several years now. But, you know, it's something that they really want it to become the heart of the school. So, you know, this person would work collaboratively with staff to plan and adapt instruction to meet the needs of all the individual students, and also act as a resource for teachers as they plan instruction as well as instructional interventions. They will conduct classes in the library on skills, research skills, using technology and online resources, digital content, print and non-print, and to ensure that lessons are integrated with the core curriculum, supported with appropriate library media standards. They will schedule availability of the library and materials to students throughout the school day. They will promote reading in traditional and innovative ways to develop initiatives to encourage and engage learners in reading, writing, and listening for understanding as well as for enjoyment. They're basically going to be the lead instructor for our new media room in green screen. And most of you probably know that we have a green screen room, and we've had limited use because we really don't have a position that's really dedicated towards the library and towards that green room. And this person, we would look for someone who has knowledge of that, because again, we're in the 21st century. We want our kids to have these skills. It would also support the social emotional need through various stations in the media center. And we would really create a library media center environment that is conducive to learning and appropriate to the maturity level and interests of students. So right now, our library is currently outdated, and we really can't do a lot unless we've got someone to really take the lead in getting that going. In terms of a reading specialist at Ford Middle School, this is not a new request. This is something that the Ford Middle School staff have been requesting for the past few years. And again, because of going through the pandemic, we knew prior to COVID, pre-COVID, this was a needed request. It's definitely needed now, as we know kids had gaps before, and they certainly will continue to have gaps as we move forward. But this person will plan, teach, and evaluate instruction for students having difficulty reading and writing. They will work with students in small groups, one-to-one or in the classroom setting, to provide support to all students who are struggling with reading and writing. They will work with the classroom teacher and or the paraprofessionals to come up with strategies to help the students get better at reading. They will give assessments and analyze data from them. And then those assessment results will really help them spot students who could benefit from more focused instruction. They will work with the classroom teacher to co-teach struggling readers. We talked about the building-based subs. And just to go back to the stipend positions, I just wanted to mention that currently that's for Acushnet Elementary, that request, because currently we have this already budgeted in our budget from last year at Ford Middle School. So this request is really being modeled after the Ford Middle School. And the focus of this group would be to move the Acushnet Elementary School forward in a positive and engaging way to improve student learning. And the team would be focused on improving student learning and all MCAS scores through differentiated instruction, specifically our response to intervention. And we would have staff represented throughout the grade levels.
Kristen, I have a question.
Now we all have questions. Why don't you go back to that other
Yeah.
screen?
I don't care. John, you can have the floor. Not a problem.
Okay, number one, I'd like to see a breakdown of how much each position it will pay, the
Okay.
cost factor.
Yep, I have that right here if you'd like. The district-wide academic coach, we have that budgeted at 58,539.
That's one person, okay?
That's one person, correct. And that's about midway through our salary scale. So really, the salaries attached were based on what we felt the market rate would be for these positions. Some positions, you need a higher certification, more years of experience. So that's reflected in some of the salaries here. So the math interventionist is also a master's step 5 at 58,539. The part-time interventionist at the elementary school is the same, 58,539, but half of that, of course, so it's 29,270. So it's the same basis. The library media specialist and the reading specialist, we thought that we would need to go to a top step, someone who's been in this position before that may have already had 10 or more years of experience. So that's our master's top step, which is $79,521 for each of those positions. Okay. The building-based subs, the 4 of them are budgeted in total at $185,000, and that's our bachelor step 1. So whatever that is divided by 4 is what each one would be. The part-time facilities worker, that was budgeted based on the maintenance scale for a 0.4 FTE, and that was budgeted at $14,000. And the school instructional leadership stipends are $1,000 each for 6 people, so $6,000.
And they are all teachers in that stipend.
Correct. I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Now, another related question to that was the teachers who were able to apply for those positions and have bumping rights back and forth under a union contract.
I can answer that one. That's it's a principal's decision, but it's basically posted, and then the principal has an interview process and chooses who they feel is best in the position.
Okay. Do they have any like tenure rights if they're come from a classroom?
No, it's not based on seniority. It's based on who would best meet the needs of the children and what they're looking
So
for.
they're at risk of. The main question I had on this, yes, you mentioned that the building-based subs was being partially funded by some grants. Okay, so you've had an opportunity to see how the program would, how it would work, okay, and evaluate it. How any of these other positions being carried out by either consultants or by grants that at this point?
No,
Not one.
no.
Okay, that's a question. I'll defer to my colleagues while I look for some more questions.
Can I just ask a quick question, Dr. Bailey or Kristen? Can somebody prioritize this wish list, please?
Well, I would not want to do that myself. When we prioritize lists, it's really a team decision. But I will tell you that when we did prioritize the list, the school department leadership team, which consisted of the central office leadership as well as principals, department heads, they actually cut some of their requests. These they felt were the top things that were needed to address all those guiding principles that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation.
So you're saying that all of these are on even keel?
Well, again, if you really wanted me to prioritize them, I would feel more
Yes,
comfortable getting back to you after talking to the leaders in the district.
Excuse me,
Okay.
can I jump in?
Yeah.
Paula, can I jump in?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, go.
So, I understand why you want to prioritize these, but as a member of the budget subcommittee, I mean, we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in this new curriculum, right?
Right.
And then we have the gap of the kids of not being in school for almost a year and a half.
Totally.
If we don't have these supports, we're throwing away our kids' education and all the money that we're spending on curriculum. So to say the reading specialist at FMS is not necessary, or at the bottom of the list, or the math interventionist is pointless.
And I hear everything that you're saying, Sarah, and I don't disagree. You know, I have kids in the district,
Right.
but at the end of the day, we need to balance too, right? Because we can't ask our residents to come up with $1 million extra, right? So this is just trying to help understand where the money is being spent, right? And where the priorities are. And I think to Mr. Hawcroft's point, like, you know, I don't disagree. A math interventionist, yes. A reading specialist, yes. You know, that all makes sense to me. Is that more mission critical than an academic coach? Is that more mission critical than a facilities worker? That's all I'm asking, is just to give me some point of reference of what the school committee thinks takes the priority. You know, what I think is not part of the school committee, but I know what I think as a parent, where I think the needs are, you know, that my children. So that's all I'm trying to understand.
Gotcha, I understand, and I hear you. Now, Paula, I have a question now. So with these added positions, this is not the entire increase, right? This is just a small portion of the budget that we're asking for, right? The changes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Mrs. Flynn went over that. I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
So the total increase from last year to this year is just under 400,000.
So we're not talking $1 million. We're not, you know, it's under 400,000. And these parts right here, these new positions, how much of that 400,000 is that?
It's actually 510,000.
Just
So it's balanced off by the decreases that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So
we have $500,000.
So Sarah, just so I understand what you're saying, the 400,000 you're talking about is the overall budget, right?
Yeah, the increase.
Okay. Yeah, and which I totally understand, and you're looking at your budget, but we at finance and the board of selectmen and the other need to look at the whole town budget. And so even though the school department budget has gone down because of the tuition, we have to factor where those kids went to, because that hasn't gone down. So although I completely understand and appreciate it's a decrease to your budget, is not a decrease to the town's budget. You see what I'm saying?
I do understand to the point of, what do you mean where the other kids are going? Is the town paying for those?
Oak Colony, yeah, for example.
They all went to Oak Colony. Okay.
Yeah, so it may have come out of your budget, but it hasn't disappeared. And so that's why I was asking before, of these decreases in tuition of high school choice out of district, if those kids just evaporated because we had a drop in enrollment, that is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when those kids just came out of your budget and just went to a different line item of the town, that to me isn't a drop in a budget.
So
right?
we're going to get to that because that is not the case. But if you give us a few slides here, we're going to fully explain the situation with the tuition and the student numbers and the population at the high school.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to interject a question here to Kristen concerning the new positions, the facility worker. Am I correct that I believe that we increased the custodial staff this year by 2 people to a permanent position?
we did. We hired 2 full-time temporary custodians, and those were paid for by the same grant that we talked about, the building-based subs, the CDRF grant.
Mm-hmm.
So those 2 that we hired this year are not reflected in this budget at all. So this budget reflects our normal baseline custodian and maintenance. We have 3 custodians in each building. We have a night custodian, 2 night custodians and a day custodian. This is under normal times, which we hope will be next year. And we have a day custodian and 2 night custodians in middle school and elementary school, and 1 full-time maintenance worker who's also the supervisor of the whole crew. Okay, and so the only position that we're looking to add to the budget is that part-time facilities worker. The two, right now we're down to just one temporary full-time custodian. We had two, we're down to just one. We are hoping to use some of the additional COVID funds that we should be getting from the Department of Ed, but that position is not in this budget here. So this budget just reflects what our regular staffing level is during non-pandemic times. So I would love to have more custodians in this budget, but as you can see, we have a lot of other positions that we're asking for. So that's not the case this year. Okay.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question on the reading specialist. That sounds like a Title I position. It almost has the same verbiage. So how would that dovetail with this particular position, Title I, and the Title I instruction that you have? Because they're zeroing in on those that are reading below grade level.
Yep. So currently we don't have any Title I at the Ford Middle School. Our Title I money is actually spent at the elementary school with our interventionists. And, you know, what we talked about last year pre-COVID is that last year we had 37% of our fifth graders were reading below a fifth grade level. We had 55% of sixth graders reading below a fifth grade level, and 72% of seventh graders reading below a fifth grade level, and 62% were testing out reading below a fifth grade level. And that was data from last year. So the focus in terms of the help going to that general population would be focused on reading at the Ford Middle School, where we feel like with the intervention program at the elementary school, they have a lot of that in place. Ford Middle School does not have any structure at all for intervention.
Okay, and just one last question on the, because I know the question came up with the building based subs as far as using some of the grants that you have, you know, ongoing. Evidently, it's not happening in the others. But if in turn these positions were funded under local money, and then you got the grants come in because you don't know right now what you get, you know, you may be getting. Would you in turn not fill the local position, or you will continue and then have the grants supplement the activities of that particular position?
Mrs. Flynn, do you want to take that?
We do know that we're getting next year in the ESSER2 grant about $304,000. 10,000 of that has to be set aside for social emotional learning, but the rest of it can be used at the discretion of the district. We do have to submit an application. That application process is over the summer. Had we needed access to that money this year, we could have applied this year, but we're going to apply for next year. We have not yet determined in total what those funds are going to be used for. I do know that we have discussed very preliminarily about our summer learning, our extended school year learning, and that could quite possibly be what some of those funds are used for. But again, it's $304,000, and I'll look to, you know, our to Dr. Bailey and our leadership team and our director of curriculum to, you know, inform how the rest of that money is going to be spent. I certainly would love to fund a custodian with it, but that's my wish list for that.
So for example, just to add to what Mrs. Flynn just said about summer, as we look to fill in those learning gaps of children, we're looking at getting as many children in as we can for summer services. We have a lot of kids who could really use the additional math and ELA. We might even do an accelerated academy, maybe a week or two before the school year. So it's this intense week where there's a certified teacher. And if we get the funding for this, which will apply, kids could come in for a full week and really get ready for the school year and get that extra boost that they so need. So we've got a lot of things going on right
Right.
now, and it's been a very busy year with the pandemic.
So what you're really zeroing in on is that you're going to use any additional grants, so forth, to supplement your budget rather than supplant anything. Is that correct?
That is usually in grants, Mr. Howcroft, as you well know, I'm sure, is.
Yes, very well.
Yes, you cannot supplant. So you can't, I couldn't all of a sudden say, oh, I've always had this teacher in the local budget, but because the local budget was cut, I'm now going to use my grant funds to pay for it. That you cannot do.
That's a maintenance of effort.
Right, correct. And yes, so there's a lot of issues with that. We get audited. And, you know, it's a complex thing, as you said, maintenance of effort. We have to maintain effort to show that we're spending money as the Department of Ed intends it, as the federal government intends it through the grant, the federal grant.
Never add, excuse me.
So there are some grants, however, and I do need to check, but this new ESSER, there is one grant that supplement rule is relaxed, and this may be it. I'm not 100% positive because again, we haven't gotten through the application process yet. But generally speaking, you are correct, Mr. Howcroft, in that we cannot do that.
So if the positions were never added,
Mhm.
the use of grants could be applied.
Correct.
But if
correct.
we add the
Mhm.
positions, we can't withdraw them and place it with the funding. Is that correct?
I would say if we added the positions and we had them for a year or two, and then we switch them over to the grants, that would be a no-no. But say we never added, we wanted to add the positions, but we didn't have the opportunity to this year, then maybe that would be an opportunity to look to the use of those grants. But again, that's going to be our next big focus is looking at how to apply for that $304,000 ESSER grant that is coming to schools.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of the building-based subs, we have been so fortunate to find 4 really good quality people. And these people want to know that they have a position, and I'm not sure that any of them would want to rely on a grant from year to year. So we just felt like now was the time to put it into the local budget.
Okay, real quick, before we get back to this, I do have for you, Gail, and everybody else, the grant question. I quickly looked that up. So this year in FY21, we received $857,000 from the Department of Ed grants, from the federal and state grants. Okay. 424,000 of those were new this year, and they were all coronavirus COVID relief grants. So in a normal year, we would have received about 433,000, and that's our Title I grant, our Title IIA grant, which is a Improving Teachers grant, Title IV Safe and Healthy Schools grant, the IDEA grants, those are our special education grants. So those are the ones, those are our, what they call entitlement grants. So you are, public schools in Massachusetts are entitled to those as long as they go through the grant application process and the amount is already stipulated based on the formulas. So again, we got about 857,000. Half of it was new grants due to COVID and half was our regular normal entitlement grants.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yep. And so we anticipate receiving the same, our normal grants that I just went through, those title grants and the IDEA grants. And we also do have knowledge that we're going to be getting that ESSER2 grant, that additional 300,000. So right now, that's all that we know about, other than, I know there was some recently passed legislation, but I don't have those amounts yet that's going to be trickling down into the municipalities. Okay. So back to our budget adjustments. And again, we're talking about what has increased, what has decreased in our budget. In instruction, you can see the big increase, of course, is our curriculum materials. And these are purchasing our curriculum for next year. Dr. Bailey touched on that a little bit at the outset about our curriculum adoption or lack thereof. So this is where you're going to see a very large part of our increase. So we do have some new curriculum that we hope to introduce in the buildings, in the schools. So I don't know, Dr. Bailey, if you want to talk about that, expand
Sure.
on that at all.
Absolutely. So in the past budgets, we've never really had a spot for new curriculum per se. We just had a spot for ordering consumable textbooks and such that the kids needed from year to year. As we explore new curriculum, this involves digital licenses and new materials. It's high quality research-based materials. So in working with both buildings, they have asked for various curriculum that's needed. So currently, just to give you an example, there's currently no curriculum for ELA at AES, which is the elementary school. We really believe that we need to align the entire district K-8 with a solid ELA program. And just to give you an English language arts. Yep, sorry about that. So just to give you an example of the cost of such a program, we're looking into one program right now that we have teachers piloting some different units in Amplify just for 1 year for K through 4 English language arts, $87,474,000. That is just at the elementary school, one content area. We looked at another ELA program that was more money. There was a 6-year option at $124,131. Again, we're still working with the representatives on these curriculum programs, and we're really trying to find the best one for our district. Math, we want to continue with the Envisions, which is $13,000 for the year. And again, currently at the elementary school, there is no curriculum for science. So by putting in a science curriculum, this would actually support a K-8 aligned science curriculum. If we look at one science program just for K-4 1 year, we're looking at $85,675. Now, in the past, since I've been here, the district has had to really rely on the gamble of whether or not we're going to get an approved town article. And, you know, I just feel, and I know the committee feels, that the teaching and learning and the curriculum, that is the meat and potatoes of what we do day in and day out. That is something that should be in the budget. And I know that Mrs. Flynn is going to get into the tuition in a minute, but I really believe this is a sign with the pandemic that this is the time to get our new curriculum into the budget because it's so sorely needed.
Dr. Bailey, we
Yes.
appropriated a certain amount of money. I remember you came before the board back in October with a woman, I believe her name was Kerry.
Correct.
And we appropriated 90 grand. Now, is that reflected in this curriculum materials itself?
So
Has
she,
that money
I
been
believe it
already
was,
okay? Has that money already been spent, or is it still?
no. So
Okay.
I believe it was $79,000 or
Okay.
thereabouts, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. That was for intervention materials. And as you know, when we purchase those types of materials like DRA kits and reading kits, they're expensive and that money goes very quickly.
Mhm.
So over the past couple of years, in addition to that $79,000 in the past, we received $50,000 1 year. And we know that's not enough, nearly enough. So we're just trying to build it up. But at the time, our curriculum director resigned. We felt like the teachers, it was too much to ask them to do one more thing. They had reached their max. So we have to be very strategic about the timing of when we implement these programs. And we do have a new curriculum director in place who is working very diligently with the elementary staff and the middle school staff on intervention and intervention programs. And that will be looked at very closely next year. We also, I know we're going to get to this in a little bit, but again, when we develop this budget, we put in, because this is our first choice, to have our curriculum materials in our budget and not leave it to a gamble as to whether or not the townsfolk would approve this, right, for an article. So we kind of did it both ways. We put a small amount in the article just in case to continue building that. But this money actually reflects what is actually needed for this year's budget coming up. But I can tell you that we always have things with curriculum that come up from teachers and principals as requests, and then not budgeted for, but it's just nice to have a little savings similar to what we do with the special ed article.
Dr.
that-
Bailey,
Yes.
excuse me,
Mhm.
is curriculum typically part of a school budget?
Yes.
Thanks.
Mhm. It's a little different in Acushnet because of the tuition-based, the tuitions for high school works a little differently in Acushnet
Mm.
because we don't have a high school. And that
Right.
has really taken up a lot of our budget. But I'm
Mm.
going to let Kristen talk about that as we get to that. But yeah, in the past, there's not been a line, but we just believe that we should have a line, especially for the needs in our district. We're so behind on curriculum adoption. And we'd like to get to a point where it's a more typical adoption, where we're looking at every 5 years, one content area, instead of trying to do what we've been doing over the past this year and into next year. But, you know, there's definitely a sense of urgency. Our kids can't afford to wait. They deserve this now. So,
So the money, to get back to that money,
Yeah.
has that been implemented? That was appropriated? Because we were told that, I remember at that meeting that, you know, if we got the article on, you had the support of the Board of Selectmen at that time. This was something that was going to be purchased so we could have it for next year, or at least that's how it was described.
Mhm.
So,
So
you know, these
she
kind of
resigned.
implementations, how long will it take? And that's a question, you know, that, you know, I have, you know,
Sure.
as we go along and see that we need another $250,000 for curriculum. I understand that there's a need for it and that sort of thing, but, you know, what's the process to get it implemented as we appropriate the money, you know,
Sure.
for
So
this?
and it's a fair question. It was unexpected that the curriculum director had to resign. So that kind of halted things, our progress. We've made a huge amount of progress in curriculum this year, but we had to really go through the process of hiring a new person. So I'm happy to say that we do have a new person in. Ms. Regari is our new curriculum director, doing a great job. She's very familiar with the district, as she was the assistant principal at Ford, and she has a very strong background in response to intervention. So she will be looking at response to intervention, that Title I area, if you will, at both the elementary as well as the middle school. And that money that was earmarked for reading intervention, if you will, it wasn't really earmarked for a curriculum program, a full program. It was more about intervention.
Right. It was
Yeah.
reading, and I believe science was also
Science.
mentioned during that
Yes.
discussion.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
But it's not off the table by any stretch. It's definitely at the forefront of our minds. And, you know, I know that it's something that she's looking at. Our priority right now is to get this curriculum, our core curriculum, our core instructional materials ordered, and then would be the intervention after that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think, so for this, the bulk, like we said, is curriculum. We have a small amount of technology and guidance supplies, and office and general supplies had a small decrease. So I think we can go to the next slide. So our next increase is in our facilities area. And for those members who have been around for a while, this is always an area that we never seem to budget enough for, or we try to budget enough and then we need to cut it as we're trying to get down to a number. So these increases that you see in facilities are really to get us to where to our actual spending. So we're always deficit spending in facilities. So this is an effort to get us to budget more actual what we need. So for example, at the elementary school, the average actual expenditure over the past 3 years, and this is at the elementary school because it's broken down by building, was $32,654 in maintenance supplies. And we typically budget, last year we budgeted $15,000. This year at the elementary school, I bumped it up to $20,000. So these increases here are strictly an effort to boost it up to what our 3-year actual is, okay? You can go to the next slide. So our biggest decrease, as we talked about, is tuition, our out-of-district tuition. So our out-of-district tuition is decreasing by almost 66,000. And where does that come from? So part of it is that we're carrying over more circuit breaker revenue from one year to the next. So our costs were higher last year. So our circuit breaker revenue went up based on what we carried over last year. So we're bringing in a bigger revenue source. So that's going to effectively decrease what we're asking for our expenditures, okay? That's coupled with a collaborative tuition decrease. We're down probably about 7 out-of-district students. So that's decreasing about 239,000. We had a slight increase in private school tuition of 8,000. And now you see here the prepaid tuition decrease. So last year, to balance the budget, we took 100,000 from last year's money, prepaid tuition, and that was an offset. Right now, we don't need to do that to balance the budget quite yet. That's always the last, budget planning that we do. So right now we don't have any. So that's a revenue decrease. So that acts as an expense increase. Okay, I know that's a little bit confusing, but that's where the breakdown is. So basically, we're getting more money and we have less costs, to put it simply, for the out-of-district tuition. And because there's about 7 less out-of-district students that we're planning for next year.
Kristen?
Yes.
Question. That's a variable though, right? That changes every year?
Yes, that changes, it changes to some extent every year. You could have some students aging out, okay? So where you are paying for, say, a collaborative tuition for them, they could get to the age where they're no longer our responsibility. So we lose that tuition. The other variable could be we could have a student move in from another district and now they become Acushnet's responsibility. We could have a student that's here in our buildings that we can't quite provide the necessary services for, so we may have to, change their placement to an out-of-district. Or the converse is true. We could have a student that we bring back from an out-of-district placement. So this is a very, very variable amount, and it changes even from one budget year to the next. So what we were planning for last year for this year is quite different than what we actually have, because students can leave, they can move in. And so this is one of our more challenging, because it's it's a lot less predictable than anything else. So just to give you an idea of how we budget for it, we take our student placements that we know of now. We assume they're going to be in those placements next year. We find out those placements have had rate increases, so we'll apply that. Maybe our student services director knows that we have some students that are quite possibly going to out-of-district placements, or they might be coming back into the building. So she figures that with her tuition request. So that's how we look at that. Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
You're welcome. So kind of the same idea for high school. We've talked a lot about that over the years. And this one also changes. And this year it's changed, it's decreased by almost 247,000. Okay, so what I know that's the main reason that drives a lot of our budget, the decreases that offset our increases. So I'm going to spend some time talking a little bit about that. So what we look at just go through very quickly how we budget for high school student tuition. So every couple months we get an enrollment roster from New Bedford High School, from Fairhaven High School, from any of our from Bristol Aggie. And so what I do is when it comes to budget time, I take a look at all of the students in grades 9, 10, and 11, because those students are going to advance to 10, 11, and 12. I disregard the 12th graders because they're gone, right, for next year. Then I take a look at our 8th grade class, and our guidance office here does a real good job of predicting where these students are going to go. So that informs us as to our 8th grade class, or 9th grade class for next year. So we'll take a look at the students that are 3 years already in high school, plus our 8th graders, where they're going. We apply the tuition figure that we've negotiated based on our agreements with the high schools, and that's how we come up with what we have. So for example, this year, that big decrease, we have 31 less students. 30 of them are at Fairhaven High School. And so I looked into this, and I remembered that a few years ago, there was a very large 8th grade class. Well, that class, in fact, is this year's 12th grade. So they're graduating. So they're not on our rolls anymore, right? So that 12th grade class is gone. So that makes up a good portion of that decrease, because the 8th grade class we have now, next year's 9th graders, is a more normal sized class. So we have our regular side, we're back to our regular 4-year, high school composition. So we lost that one big bump. So that's what makes that up. We have 30 less students going to Fairhaven High and 1 less student going to school choice.
Yeah. Kristen,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
think you might have this number better, but Old Colony has already come in and talked to us, and there is an increase in the Old Colony enrollment by
What number?
number.
Sue, by
So-
what number?
For some reason, I'm recalling 22, but I'm doing that off of 100% memory. I didn't write it down, but if somebody's got those numbers, it was not insignificant.
So it's a
So-
significant impact
It's
to
a-
the budget as whole, and it's like one
Yeah.
hand washing the other in one sense on this.
Exactly, and that's my struggle. So I know, when I made that comment, somebody said I was incorrect, but I do know enrollment, I thought in Old Colony was going up. So those students came from somewhere.
So I don't have the current Old Colony enrollment because again, that's not part of our budget, but I
Right,
can
right.
tell you that out of our class this year of 8th graders, we have 37 students who have indicated they would like to go to Old Colony. It's an application process. And we have 56 students who indicated they would like to go to Fairhaven High School. So how that breaks out over other years, right now, I don't have that information. I could look at our other years, how many of our 8th graders tend to go, but that's the information I have on that right now.
I will say, in speaking to the superintendent at Old Colony, I spoke to him about this a while ago because I know he presented at the town. And Mr. DeRoche, you might recall, or Julie, you may know, but I don't believe it was an actual increase in enrollment. I think it was their cost had increased. And so they were splitting that between the feeder schools or the towns and the districts that feed into Old Colony. So it wasn't that we were missing students. I think it had more to do with the cost. Does that sound right?
Julie,
Yeah, I'm here.
do you have that figure? It came in with the with the Old Colony.
Yeah, I believe,
proposal, budget.
John, I thought an Old Colony increase was around 270. I mean,
That's
that could
right,
be-
that's the number, but I thought, part of that was.
Right. I think Sue is correct. I think that we were very much elated that more students were going to Old Colony. So I remember that. So I don't, I think it was a dynamic increase rather than static.
If I can, there was an increase in the number of students by 15 who were going there, but at the same time, the state had given information that 85 students, the town of Acushnet had overall 85 less students in their overall population. So that's where we were getting a higher assessment. I believe it was about $250,000 based on a total of 85 students not being in the district anymore between all of the schools.
No, the point was their increase in acceptance of Acushnet students.
Yeah.
Was how many figure? What was
Well, I know for this year, they had 15 additional students.
Correct, from Acushnet. So half of the number that you, that the 30 you're looking for out of Fairhaven probably have now going to Old Colony. Is that correct?
No, well, some of it could be. A lot of it is that we had a very large graduating class, we have a very large graduating class this year at Fairhaven High. So we're losing more 12th graders at Fairhaven High than we're taking in from the 8th grade.
I understand that, but also in addition, less are going in, and probably even to New Bedford because of the increase from Old Colony. That's the point I think Mrs. Delgado was trying to make. Is that correct?
Let me give me a minute and I can check that.
Julie is correct. There are 15 new students for a total of 144 students going to Old Colony.
Okay. And what was the cost for that increase?
The change is $246,987.
Oh, that's the increase to our particular assessment, correct?
Correct.
So that's the overall increase to our assessment. But when I talked to Old Colony, when they came to the finance committee as well, they discussed that 250,000. I mean, that number was originally higher, and so I don't know how it's changed as the numbers have decreased for them. But that full number, $250,000 of that number was kind of like a made up cost to the town for those 85 students not being in the district anymore. So it was like a ability to pay cost to the town, because now with 85 less students in our overall district, we should have a higher ability to pay, and that was assessed at 250,000. And again, that could have decreased as the numbers changed a little bit from Old Colony, but the 15 students at the time accounted for 140,000 say of the increase, and then another 250 was that ability to pay. And again, I know that total number, the total assessment has come down. They've dropped it, I think, about 50,000. So I don't know how the percentages kind of weighed out on that, but they did have an initial $250,000 charged to the town as an ability to pay based on 85 students.
Yeah, but you know the cost per student, right? What is it, 15,000? Or what is the figure from Old Colony? And just to multiply that times 15, and then we know what our increase in tuition costs are. Is that correct?
I mean, I know that they do, like if you look across the board, every town has a different cost per student because
right. I'm looking at
everything is
just
based
right
on a
on those
value.
figures. I wish I had it in front of me, but it's right
I don't have it. It's about 20,000
per person. So
yeah.
you multiply that times 15 is correct? And that will be our additional assessment for tuition.
That's our additional assessment, yes. But again,
Okay.
they have different numbers. It's not like there's a set cost per student because all the towns are different. They just kind of do out a breakdown at the end of the day. When your assessment is, $300,000, they'll divide it by the 15 and give you a cost per student. But obviously that number also takes into consideration this extra money that's assessed by the state to them via the Chapter 74, I think they said, when they're doing all that. So it's not necessarily that total amount isn't necessarily based on just those 15 kids. If we didn't have that increased assessment based on our ability to pay, it would have been like $120,000 increase for us.
Well, for budgeting purposes, when we start, we should know exactly the figure of the tuition increase costs to Old Colony, so we can take a look at the savings that we have, which are being applied to instructional services out of this particular budget, the public schools budget, and we come to some type of discussion about how that money should be allocated, because we're looking, as Mrs. Delgado said earlier, we're looking at the whole budget, and not just one particular department's budget. So I think that's a figure that we've got to nail down for next week. So I hope we can do some research and maybe get some updating from Old Colony.
Julie, I do know that Aaron Polanski would be very willing if you needed him to come in and talk about the situation.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, it'd be
he's
just simple.
presented
Lift up the
already.
phone and ask him. He can give you a figure.
Well, I can get from him an update. I know he gave us an updated assessment, so I can ask for the percentage breakout between, the actual cost per student and this ability to pay. I can absolutely get that.
So Julie, I have a question for you because it's important for me to know as a school committee member. So you're saying that regardless of how many students go to Old Colony, they're charging $250,000 to the town. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm no expert at how everything works with like Chapter 74. But every town, when the state gives us, what you have for Chapter 70 money and for assessments, they look at the value of the town and they come up with like an ability to pay. They look at the number of students that are in your district and what you get for, Chapter 70 for the town. They look at a lot of stuff and have a different equation for every town. So if you look at the information, I don't have it in front of me, but the information that Old Colony gave us, all 5 towns are listed and there's a percentage breakout and every town is different, even though some towns, actually like Acushnet has the most number of students going to Old Colony, but because of the values and the potential to pay, we're actually not paying as much as other towns who have less students. So there's like a weight factor, just like I'm sure Krista knows with Chapter 70. I mean, there's a calculation that the state does. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And so essentially when the state was looking at Acushnet for this upcoming year, and in the district, that includes all schools that they're attending, all high schools, the total number of students, and they saw an overall decrease of 85 students from last year to this year. And when Old Colony presented to us, they explained that they felt it was unfair for the state to really weigh that heavily this year because a lot of students may have come off the books because of COVID, and maybe they're being homeschooled for this year, but they may be coming back in the fall because, hopefully the pandemic, everything is kind of eased up, and now those students are going from being homeschooled back into the school district. And so it's hard to kind of weigh that number heavily this year, where it's going to impact us by $250,000. And it may not be a real number because those students could be coming back. If we really did lose 85 students, the state's calculation says you should have an extra $250,000 to put somewhere. And it does make sense. I mean, that's a lot of students to lose. There should be money, there should be classrooms that could be consolidated maybe or whatever. But what we were trying to say is that may not be a real number for this year because of COVID, because so many students were homeschooled and potentially will be back in the fall. So again, I'm not an expert at that, but that's why we had a huge impact on our Old Colony. At the time of our original assessment, it was $250,000. I don't imagine that number changed because I think Old Colony took back some cuts that they had in their budget, and that's why we saw a lower assessment. But about $250,000 was assessed to us just based on our ability to pay from the state's calculation.
So to say, sorry, John. So to say that because we had such a decrease at Fairhaven High School or New Bedford or any of the Acushnet school districts tuition, when we had a decrease, does not necessarily mean that the Old Colony budget had an increase because it was fixed at, let's say, 250,000 regardless of the students. Is that correct to say?
No, it does start with part of the calculation is based on the number of students. That's how it gets allocated.
That's right.
Is based on the number of students and which towns they come from. So it is a factor in the analysis.
I've pulled
So
up the
it's not like
information.
the way they allocate the overall cost is based on the participants from each of the member towns, the number of students in each of the member towns. Acushnet has the largest percentage between Carver, Mattapoisett. I should know this. I was part of the committee. I was the part of the subcommittee. So, it is an integral part. They look at the tuition enrollment as of like October. I'm not sure why, but it's as of this October date. They look at the tuition and say, okay, this is the enrollment, and so this is how the allocation is going to go. So we don't share, proportionately, like 1/5 across the board. It is based on the students, and that's how your fixed costs and your overhead costs, all of the costs get allocated based on that.
I pulled up what Old Colony had sent. And for fiscal year 22, the required minimum contribution to Acushnet is $1,476,000 for 144 students. So if someone wants to do quick math, it's 10,000 and change per student. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the numbers that I have.
Partially, I think we just should have a figure. Maybe I'm just an old country teacher, but I just want to get to the point. How much the increase in enrollment at Old Colony is costing us? It could be per student or just a amount. How much more are we going to just send them a check for? Simple as that.
Well, according to
I don't want to care about the loss of 85 students and all that. What's the impact on the budget, the increase?
According to
that's a simple.
Yeah, according to their figures, John, it's 246 or 247. $247,000.
Okay, for the additional student. Okay.
That's what was given to me back on 2/22.
Okay.
So February 22nd. So it's already been a month. So if they've been able to adjust that figure by grants, they would talk about additional monies coming in. I don't know. Those figures haven't been produced to me, but at that time it was $247,000 increase to Old Colony.
And if the 85 is a fictitious number, the drop in student enrollment because it was a blip because of COVID, that'll balance itself out, right, in the coming year, right, in theory, if all goes, if all proceeds forward. But it's the bodies, right? It's the bodies. And what we do know, part of what's happening at Old Colony is they're not taking Freetown students, okay? Because as long as they're qualified candidates from the member towns, they have to take member towns first. So we're losing that enrollment. And so we lost it for freshman year. This coming year, we'll lose it for freshman and sophomore next year. So this is just going to be a continued issue, okay? We're not going to have Freetown students to supplement, and more kids are going there. So this is the first year of more years to come where we're going to see this increase, to Old Colony. And, there are students too.
Another question. Hopefully we finish this discussion. Just another question on the tuitions. When we're talking with the building inspector a meeting ago, he pointed out that there's a high amount, probably the highest amount of new construction going on in town, and I don't know what the impact will be on tuitions, in a sense that would be, more children could be coming in with this new construction. So I don't know if Kristen, have you sort of like factored in that as a buffer just in case?
No, years ago, in better budget times, we used to factor in a budget.
I know you remember that. Yes.
Of several students. Those days are over.
Okay.
This is based on, like I said, the number of students we have in grades 9, 10, and 11, and the number of students that we're predicting from our 8th grade class to go to these schools. And I will just say one last comment, because I know there was a question about, the Fairhaven students, how they change from one year to the next. So I can say in our budget for next year, we're looking at who we're thinking is going next year. Old Colony, those numbers, they're based on, as Sue said, on that October enrollment. So they're looking back, we're looking forward to where we're budgeting. So it's a little different, and it is also different because we have a negotiated per student tuition for New Bedford and Fairhaven. There's no additional assessment, there's no formula. This is the amount per student, roughly $10,000 for regular ed and more for special ed depending on their services. So it's a lot more cut and dry for us to say what our increase is and our decrease. So this year we do know that our decrease is driven by the fact that we had many more students in grade 12 this year that are graduating than we had coming in from grade 8. And I just took a quick peek because I know that was a question. how our grade 8 students compared this year to last year, and it's different by 1 student. So we have roughly the same amount of students going to Fairhaven High from this year's 8th grade class as to last year's 8th grade class. So that real difference for us was that larger 12th grade class. So they're off the books. So until we get another, big class coming up going to high school, we should be down to just our normal, increases and decreases in tuition. Okay. Any more questions on tuition? No? Okay.
One more question, sorry.
Yes.
You mentioned the large class that's now the graduating class.
Mhm.
Years ago, we had a really small kindergarten class, which is we put in the full time. Where are they in the cycle now? Are they like 7th grade?
I know that there's a class that's at the elementary school that we keep from year to year. We either increase a teacher and then decrease a teacher. I want to say that is like right around 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade area.
Fourth grade, Kristen.
Is it 4th grade? Okay. So I know it was still at the elementary school where we were adjusting how many teachers we have at each grade. So I did take a look at next year just to see. And actually our 8th grade class, our 7th grade class now, compared to our 8th grade class, is right around the same. There's a few less students. So we shouldn't, right, as of right now, see a bump unless a lot more of those students choose Fairhaven High than choose Old Colony. So, there's a lot of variables here, but our enrollment from this year to next year is pretty stable.
Okay. So when did we put in full-time kindergarten?
Oh my gosh.
Because full-time kindergarten, we had like 50
Yeah,
something kids.
and we did have tuition-based kindergarten for a while, and then we did universal kindergarten.
Yeah.
And when we had the tuition-based kindergarten, there was still some part-time and some full-time kindergarten if you wanted to pay. I would say maybe 10 years or so ago. It's been quite a while.
Kristen, I think it's 10 years. Emma's in 9th grade right now, and I did pay for full time.
Mm-hmm.
So it must have been the year after that. It was
probably right around. Yeah, it's been a bit.
Well, I know it was before my daughter and after my son. So I've got a 6-year window I know I can nail it into. So that's why I'm like, at some point we're going to see the drop.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I think it's either 7th or 8th grade would be, I don't think it's 6th grade. I think it's either 7th or 8th grade would be that class that I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's still a small class, then we're going to see the drop. We should see a drop somewhere.
I know there's maybe a 3-student drop coming into the 8th grade for next year. I didn't look down to grade 6, but quite possible. Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe it's 6. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so there's a drop coming at some point, though. You would expect.
I think what we're saying is that it's staying very stable right now. That the 12th graders were a very large class, but now what you're going to see in this year's budget and following over the next several years is you're going to see more typical numbers. Tuition.
Yeah, my thought escaped me now.
I apologize.
Oh, no. I was the one that wasn't. Please. It'll come. The question will.
So,
class ratios. We usually in previous budgets, presentations, we had we were shown graphs, and we were shown a number of students in the class ratio of the teacher in each of the classes. So and that's tied with with MCAS, trying to increase the MCAS scores in a sense of a good size, a small size class. What are class sizes at this point from grade? You have that information?
I don't have it. No.
I don't have it right in front of me, but I will tell you they're reasonable. Some classes are around 20, 23. It varies, but we do try to keep the class sizes at a appropriate amount of students for optimal learning.
Okay, so that is 2025. And what is our total population, school population, KK through 8?
Oh, it's over 1,000.
Okay,
I can get it for you. Hold on. Okay, it is. So not including homeschoolers and kids right now who are fully remote with the TECA Academy, not including out of district. The total number of students in our schools is 922. But again, that doesn't include all students in our district. It's definitely over 1,000 students.
I think at the last count, we had about 57 students in TECA. So, you could add that to get what are more typical. And then I'm not sure how many homeschool students we have.
It went way up this year. We went from like 14
Right.
students to maybe like 50, and that was due to the COVID-19. So we're anticipating that that number will go down and the kids will hopefully come back into our buildings.
All right. We can go to the next slide if we're all set. Okay, so our next budget adjustment is with transportation. So our regular day transportation, again, that's the big yellow bus, is increasing by 62,000. The part of that is $24,000 for the late bus. Now, for the past several years, we've, in our preliminary budgets, have put in for the late bus, but as we've had to make budget adjustments, the late buses come out. So every budget, we really strive to put the late bus in, but it usually comes out. So that increase of 24,000 is going to zero, from zero budgeted for the late bus to 24,000. And that's running 2 late buses 2 days a week for most of the school year. We know that we're not going to run a late bus, right at the start of the year or around holidays and vacation periods. So it's budgeted for 40 weeks, I believe, for 40 days of a late bus rather. So that's in the rest of the increase in the regular day transportation is about 38,000, and that's the increase in our contract from last year, from this current year to next year, to provide transportation service to Acushnet Elementary, Ford Middle School, New Bedford High School, Fairhaven High School, and St. Francis Xavier and Bishop Stang. So that's that.
Sorry, just a quick question, sorry.
Yes.
On the late bus, we're budgeting 24,000, but when you look at prior years, we've never spent more than 15.
Correct. So in this year's contract, we just went out to bid. We opened the bids a few weeks ago. The per day late bus went up to $300 per day. And that's what that big difference is there. It never used to be that high per day. So that was the increase that was part of the winning bid. The contract is awarded on the home to school transportation, and so we just asked for a price for a late bus. So we only had one bidder, and they were awarded the contract, and the late bus is $300 per day. So that's where that big increase is, you see. And what we've had to do over the years, because the late bus goes up every year, the cost per bus. So in order to keep it steady, what we've done is we've adjusted the number of days. So we've offered it less and less days to try to keep it steady. But now with this big increase to $300 a day per bus, this was the first effort to offer the late bus. So that is, something that may have to be under consideration. Okay, so that's where to answer your question, that's why you see such a big difference between what's budgeted and what's actual. Okay. All right, the rest of our adjustments, we have an increase in technology contract services of just around 50,000, 51,000. And a lot of that is services that we started to have this year called DDoS mitigation. Some of you may be familiar that our internet, our servers were under attack in the fall, and we were down for several days to almost a week. So the service that we have put in to stop these attacks does have a cost to it. So that's part of our increase in our technology contract services. And we've also added to our managed services contract. So we have a consulting contract to assist with some of our larger technology services. And this is typical because now we have such a heavy reliance on technology. Everything in our school buildings operates around technology. So we really need to make sure that the infrastructure and the backbone is there. So that's where you see that increase. English language learners contract services. Now, you may recall from a few years ago that we requested a position for an English language learner teacher. We no longer need that position. Our student population is such right now that we do not require a dedicated English language learner teacher. We just need a consultant to come in and do some work with those students. So whereas we had a position before, that position has been eliminated. That's not in the budget, but we're looking for a small amount in case we need to have some contract services to provide those services.
And that's required by law. Those services, those kids have to be serviced depending on the level that they're at, so many hours per day. And because our student population has decreased in the English language learners, we are able to just get a vendor right now. And whereas before we had several more students that required the services of a full-time, it just made more sense for us to have that person on staff than paying more money out to a vendor. So
we have a small decrease in professional development. Professional development coming out of the superintendent's office. That program is over, so we no longer need to budget for that. And also a decrease in special education contract services. Those are the services we seek for additional OT, PT, ABA therapy. So the student services director took a good look at what she had been, what had been spent over the past few years and made that adjustment accordingly. So that ends the second part of our presentation of where we explain the increases and decreases. And just again, in summary, the increase is almost 400,000. The bulk of it is coming from salaries, from our new positions, and from our curriculum that we're seeking to add. It's balanced off by decreases mostly in tuition and some in transportation, some in PD, and some in contract services. And there's also a small increase in facilities. So that's where our increases come from. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're just going to summarize the budget for you and also talk about our capital requests. So you can see here our total budget request is broken down into 5 cost centers: our central office, that's our superintendent's office, business office, school committee, legal expenditures. Our elementary school budget, so all the costs that it's entailed in the elementary school, from the salaries of the administrators to the teachers to the custodians to the supplies, the materials, the utilities for the elementary school. Likewise for the middle school. In special education, you're going to see your special education teachers and paraprofessionals, in addition to the student services office, and your tuitions for collaborative, private, and high school special education tuitions. The district budget is where we have our high school tuitions, non-special ed, where we have our transportation costs, non-special ed transportation, our medical and health services, our technology budget, and some of our district-wide facilities. So that's how the whole budget is broken down. And you can see here just the chart. Year to year, the chart is very similar. This year, the largest portion is in the district-wide, and that is not surprising because that's where our high school tuitions and our transportation is. Those are, those of you who have been with us for a while, those are the costs that we talk about that are what we consider our fixed costs, our costs that, we really don't have any real say over. And so that's where the biggest portion is. followed by the elementary school. You know, some of the new positions that we were looking for are at the elementary school. And then special education, we have our collaborative and our out of district, you know, in our private school tuitions and special ed transportation, and also the teaching salaries and the special education budget. For middle school, similar to the elementary school. And then central administration, again, that small portion, that's just the, you know, the central office of the school, including legal and the school committee. So this chart here just shows over the past many years what the budget was, what the dollar increase or decrease was, and what the percent increase or decrease was. So, you know, some years it's been a zero increase. Some years it was a small decrease, a small increase, sometimes a larger increase. So this year we're looking for, last year was a 2% increase. This year we're looking for a 2.63% increase. So you can see over the years, you know, where it's varied. Okay. So here's our chapter 78, and that's the state aid to schools, and that's based on the formula. Julie touched on that. The state determines, based on a very complex formula, a town's ability to pay for its education. So in a Acushnet sense, we receive, per the state formula, the minimum $30 per pupil increase. So our increase from last year from the state aid to this year is $36,000, and that's $30 per pupil increase. So that's what we are getting from the state. They say that our foundation enrollment is 1,207 students, and that is down 85 students. So you can see that that's affecting this as well. Actually, it's not, because we're held harmless. We're just getting the minimum $30 per pupil increase. But it's that same 85 students that I believe that Old Colony was talking about. So here in chapter 70, we're just getting the minimum. Basically, the formula is saying Acushnet, you know, we're going to hold you harmless. Your ability to pay is this, and this is what the state is giving. Okay. So when we break that down to,
because it may be for future planning purposes, and you're probably, I don't know if that figure has ever been known to, you know, especially especially when you're applying for grants. If we had not had the emergency shutdowns, which cut down on sales tax and so forth, that, you know, the whole economic downturn because of COVID, what would it have been our allocation under chapter 70? Is there a figure available to you?
No, but I can tell you that over the past many years, Acushnet has gotten the minimum per pupil increase based on where we fall in that formula. So the state is saying, you know, you're paying what you should be paying. We're paying what we should be paying. We're not going to take away money, and we're just going to give you that minimum per pupil increase. And I believe that's all we've gotten for several years now. So I don't know, you know, I don't know how to predict the future. But in this case, the pandemic didn't affect us. If it did, it's unknown, because we're getting the same amount of aid.
Okay, so you tell me, we have no impact as far as the COVID, as far as financially, on our town finances. Is that what you're saying? Unless
the foundation enrollment, well, no, because we're just getting that minimum increase. So they took what they gave us last year and gave us $30 more per pupil. So if we had more students in our foundation enrollment, we may get, you know, $30 more for each student, but that's about it.
For figure, Scott, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm looking for a figure. What if times were normal, so to speak, financially, economically in the Commonwealth? What, you know, what would have the governor budgeted to go through that formula, and how much more we would have received?
Right. No, I don't. We don't have that. And again, like I said,
it's every year to remember for the future.
Right. Every year we just get that minimum $30 increase, pandemic or not. So where we do have other funds, as I said, was some of those COVID related grants. But some of those are very specific. Some of those are coming to an end. So all I can do in this budget, and this is what we've tried to do, is say this is what we need to run our school the way we think is for the best interest of our students. So this is the amount of money that we need to run the school. So of that, 41.7% is coming in from the state, and the remainder, if this budget holds, would be from the town side. Okay. All right, so that's the end of our summary presentation. So finally, in the home stretch, we have some capital requests. In years past, we didn't have a capital request list. For whatever reason, it was not availed itself to the school department. We, postponed some of these types of things, or we tried to fit it within our budget or any surplus money we had. But several years ago, we were encouraged to put together capital requests. So here's what we're looking at. Some of these items, they may be familiar to you because they were on our list last year, but we know that things changed shortly after when we met last year with the pandemic. So I'm going to go through those. And you can certainly ask some questions. So this one's familiar. Replace the FMS gym and cafeteria wall. So that's the wall that divides the cafeteria from the gymnasium. We're looking, this is original, I believe, to the building renovation. So it's going on, 20 years old. It's very worn out. We're looking to replace it with an automatic one, so our staff doesn't have to move it themselves, more of an electronic one. So it is time to replace that. It's, some of the wall is torn, and we need to change that. So we're looking to replace that for the cost. The quote that we got a few years ago, we actually called and they said that the amount is the same. So we're looking for about $84,000. The rooftop antenna. So that is to replace the antenna on top of the elementary school roof. Okay. And we'd like that to coincide with our roof replacement. So it has our radio system repeater attached to it, as well as 2 DPW antennas. So this would service not only the school department, but other town departments as well. So if we got a new tower, we'd look to add other communications equipment, so just enhancing communication across the town. It might very well be original to the building, and it is in desperate need of replacement. So now would be the time as we are replacing our roof. Roof preventative maintenance. We've had this from year to year. This is just to address any leaks that arise during the course of the year. We've had a fairly decent year for roof leaks this year. Last year was not so good. This year we've been doing okay, but we're just seeking to replenish those funds in that account so that we have something to go to should leaks arise. This upgrade security cameras, this was on our list last year as well, and this is just the final phase in upgrading the remainder of our analog cameras to digital cameras, so a small amount for that. We're looking for some funds to replace some tile, mostly at the elementary school. We have classrooms that tile is either cracked or lifting up. It may need to be replaced in the entire classroom, or it just may be some sections. So we just would like to have some money to address that as those repairs come up, whether it be during the summer or during school vacation. So we just would like to have some flexibility to be able to do those projects as we can. Okay. The FMS rooftop condensers. If you recall, a couple years ago, we had FMS and AES on our list. We were able to get AES done. So these are the condensers that sit on the roof that run our refrigeration and our coolers and freezers for the kitchen. So we need to replace them at the middle school. Dark fiber, the director of technology put this through. So it would be run down Middle Road, connecting the schools to the police department, and it would allow for interoperability with security, phones, servers, internet, PA systems. So again, enhancing communication up and down Middle Road from us to police and quite possibly EMS. Driveway repair, we've had this every year for the past couple years, so we're just seeking to backfill that account to replace what we've used to do some driveway repair in and around the schools. The DPW has done some of that work for us. So we'd like to continue that pending funding and pending their availability. We do have some areas that definitely need some work. Our director of facilities is looking for a utility work vehicle that can assist in landscaping tasks and plowing, to put a plow on it to do some of our walkways. It would make it a lot faster for us to get some of our walkways done when we do have snow. Some landscaping, to load some brush and, things like that on it. Right now, we're just using an old golf cart. And because in the winter time, in the early spring, like right now, we still have the sander in the bed of the truck. So that renders that truck useless for carrying stuff around. So we're looking for that. Additionally, as Dr. Bailey mentioned, we're looking to add to our curriculum. That is an article that we've had for several years, so we're looking to replenish that. And additionally, to continue to add to our special education stabilization fund, the rainy day fund for special ed. So that is all I have for capital requests. So I'll certainly take some questions about that, or any final questions in general about our budget.
Well, I have a question,
Okay.
and I'm the only member of the select board here tonight. So I don't know if it reflects the complete select board in that. But the select board is aware that there is a surplus in the school this year. So when I see capital requests totaling $416,000 being asked for as an article for town meeting, my question is, geez, what are we doing with the surplus? Because the surplus could cover this amount. And, I'm a pragmatic person by nature. So I'm just looking at this as black and white. The town, I would be remiss to say, and I'm sure the finance committee knows all these numbers, but the town takes in about $650,000 to $700,000 a year, and the school's asking for half of that. Which, hey, the school gets half the budget in normal times anyway. But we have this surplus amount of money that I think should be considered in a number of these issues that were brought up to the different boards tonight. And, it can go to further discussion, how we're going to handle it. But I think it would be very helpful if some of that money was put up on the table so we could use some of it to offset some of these costs that we're being asked to absorb. Because, once we reach a point, we have 2% increases every year, the numbers are going to escalate and the snowball is going to hit us. So I think Sue brought it up earlier that, we have to look at the total budget of the town. Schools, I'm supportive of the schools. I think the school committee and the schools have seen the support they've gotten from the select board, in the past couple of years, at least since I've been on it. And, so I think it needs to, for either tonight or further discussion, how we're going to address some of these monetary issues that we're being forced to decide on in this upcoming new budget.
So I will say that's an excellent point. I will add a few comments and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Bailey or perhaps the budget subcommittee. There are a few things on our capital request that we would not be able to take care of with a surplus, simply because the funds that are in surplus are part of our FY21 operating budget. So for example, we couldn't use that for $15,000 of roof repairs unless we were going to be able to, unless we had $15,000 worth of leaks that we were going to repair from June 15th when school ends to June 30th, okay? So some of these projects by their nature have to take place next fiscal year. So I think that point I would like to be understood. We have a small window of time to do some of these larger projects. Some of them, can we do them during a school vacation week? For example, it might be possible to upgrade the security cameras between now and the end of the fiscal year. It may be possible to purchase a work vehicle, the Gator. It won't be possible, I don't believe, to do the driveway repair, depending on funding and the DPW's availability, and the fact that we have cars in our parking lots until June 15th, 16th, around that time. Curriculum, that's all for next fiscal year. So that's, there's a little bit of, I hesitate to say strategy, but it is that's involved in that. So there are some things we could take care of, but there are some things that we can't. I don't think the rooftop antenna could be done right now with FY21 funds, but that's something that would have to take place after July 1. Okay.
Mhm. So I guess that spins me around to what can the money be used for then? Or can it be used for anything? Well, you've mentioned a few things it can be used for, but there's still be some surplus. So is there something that it can be used for? Or are you just saying it's
Or
not applicable to next year?
Well,
Can it be turned back to the town and then at the end of the day, cash is fungible, right? Turned back to the town and it could be used to fund those as part of the, special articles, right? I mean, we shouldn't spend just to spend. I mean, Julie,
So
That's-
I can add that Julie did come to one of our budget subcommittee meetings and met with the budget subcommittee. And one of the outcomes from that meeting, we did have a discussion about surplus money. We wanted to have a strategic discussion in a workshop, and we were waiting for a date for the Board of Selectmen and Julie to kind of get back with us. And that never really came to fruition for whatever reason. But we're willing to do that. For example, last year, the surplus money, we never spend money just to spend money, right? We are always very thoughtful in how we spend the money. So last year, for example, we knew we were going into a pandemic, and we knew we had to address certain learning models. So we were able to purchase Chromebooks. And if we didn't do that early on by spending that money, we never would have gotten the Chromebooks in time for our students. As a matter of fact, everybody in the world was ordering Chromebooks, and there were still districts very late into the school year that did not receive them. We were able to receive ours a lot sooner than most districts, and that is because we ordered it very early on. We ordered a lot of PPE for our teachers and students, masks, hand sanitizer. We knew we were going to need all of those things. So we felt like we were very thoughtful so that we could really get our kids in. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done in this district. And our teachers have been fabulous in terms of getting our kids in as much as possible. And we've done, that, our K-1 kids were in 4 full days a week all year. We just recently got our second graders in, and now our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders are in 4 days. And by April 5th, we'll have the whole district back. And again, that's above and beyond. So we're constantly being thoughtful about money.
And that's not, and Dr. Baylor, that's not what I was implying. So please, that's not it. All I'm saying is, do we consider these capital expenditures as part of the priority when you're making decisions? And last year, an anomaly, right? Computers, PPEs, all of that. All I'm saying here is if we all work together, if that is a priority, but you can't take the excess from the budget for, whatever, because government runs different than business, right? We can figure that part out. If that's the priority, we can figure out how to get it all done. And all I'm saying by that is factor that into the decision. That's all I'm saying.
We wanted to have a joint meeting. We already met with Ms. Hebert about this. And the budget subcommittee felt like it would be wise to have a workshop with the Board of Selectmen about this issue. So I don't know if that's something that still interests folks, but we were waiting on a date. I know that the school committee members really wanted to have that meeting.
I just look at it as if the money's turned back to the town, it goes into free cash, which would make it, I believe, available for a town article next year.
Right.
So, the money will still be there. I just don't want to see, I'm just trying to juggle all the balls.
Right, that would be one way of doing it. Is the turn it in and becomes free
Okay.
cash. Now there's a time factor because it needs to be. Julie will tell us. It has to be certified. It's free. So it can be then reallocated, and probably we can, in our minds, earmark that type of money that's been turned in, and turned to free cash and then certified, and then say, okay, let's apply this to some of the articles. The second part way is the school committees have a certain degree of fiscal autonomy. They can transfer money from one line item to another and utilize their surplus that way. But I don't know the time factor whether they have to use all that money or allocate it before June 30th. So now maybe I'm wrong, but Julie, you probably can fill in some of the details that I've just tried to explain.
Yeah, so for it to be an expense allocated to FY21, it has to be for supplies or services ordered in that fiscal year in order to encumber the funds.
So they encumber them until and use it in August, right?
You have to,
whatever.
Yeah, in order to encumber money, it has to be for supplies or services that were used or ordered by June 30th. So you can't just encumber money and say like, oh, cool, we'll use it in August. It would have to be for something that you actually bought in June, or the services were at least started in June, but you didn't get the invoice until afterward.
Right.
So I just like to jump in here. So Julie, we did have that conversation with the budget subcommittee, and we talked about the excess that we have now. And I personally felt that I needed to wait until most of the school term was over, or at least mid, before we decided, yes, we're able to do this, and yes, we're able to do that. But what has happened, and Julie just alluded to that, is we have to complete these things by June 30th. So now with a lot of the things that we wanted, there's a problem. A lot of people that, and then use it next year. You can't do that. So the options were, take these extra funds, give them back to the town. That was option one, and have them go into the free cash, like you said, John, and then put it as an article. However, that's not a guarantee. That still has to go to town and get voted on. So
Correct.
Let's say the community doesn't want a wall. Let's just use that as an example. Then we don't have it. Okay. And then the option two, which Dave, you had mentioned, you said, well, why don't you just use these funds? Can we buy the wall now and have it almost installed by the end of June? But then Julie brought up the fact that, well, technically that's an article, correct? And maybe that's not the proper way of doing it. And this is why we wanted the workshop with the selectmen to just have a candid conversation about our school district needs these items one way or another. However way, we can work together on making everything happen, let's just talk about it. So Dave, if you could get your other selectmen on board with getting us a workshop, Craig and I and Paula and Kristen would love to meet with you, and Julie, and just let's talk about this, because we know we want to push our school district into a level that it deserves. And it's been a long time coming. And I think we just need to have a conversation about it.
Well,
I
Sarah,
think
okay, John.
just look at whether you can see all of the town departments except the school committee would have to, like, if they wanted to have they would have to go to a reserve fund transfer and all that sort of stuff if they exceed in line items. And so the school committees must have the flexibility to reallocate within their budget. Now, I may be wrong. I would check the regulations, really, but I think that you can reallocate.
We could, John.
They have the authority.
We could, John. However, we want to have an open dialogue with the town to sort this out and make sure that we're all on the same page, just like we're doing now with all the line items. We want to be completely transparent. So that's why I think a workshop would be the perfect opportunity to just talk more
When
about
there's a
it.
shortage of funds and everybody needs funds, and this town really needs some in certain areas, as Dave outlined. Nice guys finish last. So just sharpen your pencil and see what you can do with your guidelines.
And I want to add, because sometimes there are things that are these hidden costs, right? So we're still in the process of settling a bus contract from last school year. We don't know what that's going to come out if there's a settlement. That might have to, that may impact our surplus, right? So there's situations going on like that are not front and center, right? They're not articles per se, but they're costs associated that we may have to use our budget for. And we can certainly get into the details of that during a workshop.
Well, you're speaking to the vice chairman, so I wish I could, dictate policy, if you want to call it that. But I will, I'll talk to the chairman. I'll talk to my fellow select board member, Dave Warner, and see how we can proceed with this. Because it is an issue that has been brought up with the select board, or it's been known to the select board that there is a surplus. And, Sarah, I understand, it goes back to general funds and will the town support it? Well, I think with the support of the select board and the finance committee, the town will vote for it. Nothing's a guarantee. I absolutely agree with you there, 100%. Just trying to, like I said, balance it all out so people can walk away satisfied at the end of the year and have pretty much what they need.
Maybe check the issue about reallocation within the budget with the town council to get, that'd be my suggestion. So basically, you're doing it legally and you're not subject to some type of kickback from an audit or something like that. That's number one. In my other years, I used to have a full-time lawyer on my staff just to finagle me through some fiscal questions such as this. So that may be another route to take, Dave.
So just to feedback on what Sarah had said, yeah, I mean, it's not that they can't use the money this year for those articles. If the wall could be installed, it's certainly a matter of timing. But if they can do it, the point, like Sarah said, was to be transparent, to work together. We're one town. So I know the school committee obviously has their meetings on TV, but it's not always easy for us to kind of keep in the same loop, but getting together like we're doing right now and having this discussion with, honestly, the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and the school committee all together. These are the people who are making a lot of the decisions for the town. I think it's such an important thing, and that's what we're really trying to do, Sarah, and I'm really hoping that we can still get that done. I haven't like put it to the side. I'm definitely still working on getting that together because I do think it's important to have this meeting and let's all talk through it and say, yes, we all agree, let's do this with the money this year. And as long as we're on the same page, then great, let's move forward with it. And we know what we're doing with the money because I think we all have that same objective to do what's best for the students. So
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Julie.
Yes, I'd like to add that I understand all the departments in town have wants and needs. How we pay for them is the big answer. And this budget is the biggest budget in town. So it's definitely going to get scrutinized by the finance committee before we vote on it. If we have any more questions, we will definitely be in touch.
Well, we greatly appreciate, the consideration, and we've been extremely thoughtful about what we've put into this budget, especially during the pandemic year and those guiding principles that we reviewed tonight. This is the bare minimum. There's no fluff in this budget. This is what our children need and deserve, as Sarah said. And there is significant learning loss, and we have an opportunity here to really do what's right by our kids. So, we are advocating for this budget. And, should you have further questions, we're more than happy to, please contact us and we will get you your answers.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Well, if that is the question part and everybody has voiced their opinions. I think the next thing on the agenda is motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Do we need a roll call vote on this from every department?
Technically,
I
you
don't
do.
think so.
Okay, well, I know that, hey, we got a letter from the lawyer. So that's what it said to do, to be official. So if every department could just make a motion to adjourn their department, that would be great.
Motion, I make a motion to adjourn. Finance Committee.
Second,
Make a motion to adjourn on behalf of the school committee.
So moved.
And motion to adjourn.
So
So
we all
moved.
in unison say aye?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much, everybody. I really apprate this time.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.